Hello, and welcome to today's Mindset. I am here with Stephen MacGregor, not to be confused with Conor McGregor. Stephen MacGregor, a former industrial head, heartland you were born you were born and raised in Scotland. You also pursued a PhD in Glasgow, that took you to Stanford and Carnegie Mellon. By the way, what is Carnegie Mellon?
Pittsburgh.
Ah, followed by teaching at IESE in Barcelona, IMD in Lausanne, and CEIBS in Shanghai. You've actually been helped improve the health and well-being of more than 20,000 people worldwide through your sustaining executive performance program. And then you founded Lab in 2007, which is something that I really want to get into, which helps you you lead consulting and leadership development, engaging with clients, including McKinsey, Salesforce, and Santander. You have an honorable professor of health and well-being at the Glasgow School of Art. You are the author and leading co-author of 6 books, including the newest book that you came out with, The Daily Reset. Stephen, how do you juggle all this as a successful entrepreneur? It seems like you're doing so much and you've done so much in your last 20 years.
Even listening to you, Daniel, and great to talk to you today. Great to be on the show. I feel like I need to lie down after you've given me that introduction. I feel tired myself.
I mean, I was just juggling all that was a little difficult on my side as well. I mean, it seems like you have so much complexity coming from so many different backgrounds in what you've done.
I think I've taken a very broad-based approach to my career, and that I think comes from my background. I studied design. I'm an engineer, and the focus was design thinking, and that's part of the reason I was at Stanford back in 2001. That was the Institute of Design there, and working with professors in mechanical engineering who were part of IDEO, Tom Kelly, part of IDEO product development in Palo Alto, which is a very successful innovation firm. And I think design is about, you have a very exploratory based approach to problems and to the world around you. And it's a very holistic approach. And I think I took on that mindset, let's say, that approach to my own career. Whereas one other individual might drill down and just very much focus on one area for most of their career. I've had that very exploratory approach. I think that's why maybe it sounds better than it is, but very kind to to mention.
So tell me a little bit about your book, that the Daily Reset. What kind of gave you the inspiration to write this book?
I got it here just so that you can see it. That's nice, kind of bright cover. I there's a couple of things in that mix. Last year it marked 20 years that I'd been working in the field of well-being, and I'd written a couple of books, and worked with a lot of people around the world, primarily in the context of the workplace, and I just wanted to take it to another level. I wanted to kind of really condense all of the things that I had learned in those past 20 years and put it out also in a very accessible form, Daniel. And I was very conscious of the fact that, not necessarily that I want to dumb down a lot of the important insights that I've gained over the years, but I just wanted to make it accessible. So people are so time crunched these days. They don't have time to read books in depth. And so the format of the Daily Reset is a page a day. So it's something that anyone can pick up. You make your coffee in the morning, you read a couple of minutes at night. Seriously, you only need 2 to 3 minutes to read the day's nudge. So there's a nudge for every single day of the year. Each month has a theme, ranging from sleep, which is the month of March, to purpose, to leadership, to community, all of these things that I think are very useful for well-being. And so I just felt that this was the best form of getting it out there into the world and for people to pick it up. Whereas normally they're time crunched, they don't want to think about well-being. They don't think about well-being until they're broken. I just want to make people a bit more proactive, right?
It's like going
pick
to the
it up,
doctor. Going to the doctor when
exactly,
you're hurt, right?
Absolutely. So that's the main rationale in that book.
So, what are some of the teachings that you find are impactful in from what you've learned over the last 20 years?
I mean, there's so much. I mean, even just I was had a conversation yesterday, and I read the day's nudge, which was February 28th, and that one
Okay.
was about finding your keystone, and the keystone habit is like the secret sauce that we all have, and so it's different for each individuals. For some person, so for someone, it could be the importance of sleep, or even just
Hmm.
sleeping 20 minutes more every night. For someone else, it could be exercise. For someone else, it could be something a lot smaller. It doesn't need to be the big areas. It could be just a little bit more social contact, phoning a loved one in the afternoon when our energy tends to wane a little bit in the afternoon. So what I encourage people to do in our work is they go on a voyage of discovery, and they find out their own secret sauce, their own keystone habit. But a couple of other ones over the years that have been hugely impactful. Sleep, absolutely. That
I like
transforms
sleep. I like
people's
sleep.
lives, right? And business is often celebrated the lack of sleep, and the fact
Right,
that
right.
an entrepreneurial mindset is to work all the hours. It's the grind, and you leave sleep as a luxury that isn't going to help you get where you want to go. But research shows, inarguably, that if you invest just a little bit more time in preparing for sleep and improving the quality of sleep, it's not just quantity, you improve your whole way of thinking and about how you can solve problems. So sleep really is a key professional skill. And other ones like purpose, right? Where are we going? Why are we
Hmm.
doing the things that we're doing every day? And I think also, given the experience of the pandemic that many of us have had, just thinking about what is your North Star? Why are you investing your time and energy more than just maybe the paycheck? Paycheck's important, absolutely. But, beyond that, what are you doing? Are you going to look back in 10, 20 years and be happy with the things that you've done? So that's just a couple that I've found over the years that have been very useful for people.
I love this idea. Breaking it down to one page a day, I guess makes it sets it in a very digestible kind of position where it's just one page. And I guess in that one page, from what you would learn. Are there actionable items that you provide in the book where we learn a little bit about, and as you said, that nudge, but then you're giving advice on what action someone needs to take? Because I mean, we could give information all day long, but until we put that into our day to day. So what are what's a nudge? What's the nudge for today, and how does that represent into an actionable item?
Yeah, so I'll read 1st of March. I don't know when you're going to broadcast this conversation, but today being the first day of March. But you're absolutely right. It's not enough just to give people information, or to give them knowledge. You have to
Hmm.
mobilize them to action in some way, and that's the whole theory of nudging, right? That you give someone the kind of little, just that little
Is
A little
piece of the
push.
puzzle. Yeah, and,
Let's
and
get you
it's a little
going.
push, right? So most of the form of these nudges, is that I'll share a piece of science, or a case study from an organization, or also a personal story. People really engage with stories, so
absolutely.
I'm very vulnerable in the book. I share a lot of my own failures, a lot of my own fears, and I think that helps that bond with the reader, and it helps to engage people. And then the second part of the nudge is often just a question, right? It's like, and it could be something very prescriptive. So it could be for sleep. It could be, try and note down what you do in the last hour before you go to bed,
Ah, okay.
and then you try and identify yourself what you need to change. Many others are prescriptive. There's a lot of knowledge in there that you can get the answer, but I think more important than the answer, Daniel, is the question, and feeding the curiosity in the reader so that we can actually find the answer ourselves. So that's the
Ah,
kind of the
interesting.
form, and just it's a book, but it's also a journal. So there's space. Even in that one, it's sleep hygiene. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a little bit of space, and you can
Hmm.
fill
Hmm.
in, the answers to the questions. And as promised, the 1st of March. So March is the beginning of the theme of sleep. So this is quite a short one, but this is pretty typical. So it starts. The title of the nudge for March the 1st is "Are You Interested?" And it starts from Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep, which was a very best-selling book that focused on sleep in the last couple of years. And from that book, there's an excerpt that says, scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory, makes you more attractive, it keeps you slim and lowers food cravings, it protects you from cancer and dementia, it wards off colds and flu, it lowers your risk of heart attacks and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested? And that's the end
Absolutely.
of the section. And then at the end, I just add on this little nudge to action. And I say, if it was a pill, we would buy them by the bucket load. Getting more and better sleep is a trickier proposition. Let's see what we can do about that this month. So it's just that
Awesome.
little taster, and then the rest of the month is digging into sleep.
That sounds that that's how, again, you broke it down in a way that somebody who's not used to reading, and I think that's a lot of today's society. It's we want small tidbits, right? 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. We don't seem to have the kind of, I guess, the capacity to sit there, and or most people don't. So that's actually a very. So how does this translate to as an entrepreneur? Because a lot of our listeners, Stephen, are entrepreneurs. They're small businesses. They're solopreneurs who are really starting to make an impact and wanting to kind of grow their business. What is the I guess the overlap between what you are teaching, whether it's through your books or through your programs that you do set, which are tailored specifically to entrepreneurs and those alike, and we'll get into that. But what's the overlap, and what can someone expect if they were to take these actions? How would that improve the quality of one life and I guess more importantly their business?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And entrepreneurs over the years have been a very important segment that we've looked at and we've thought about the right approach, because I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea with health and well-being that it's about doing less work, and that if you have a huge goal in front of you, and you are an ambitious individual, then that's fantastic. And health and well-being will help you get there. It won't be a break to what you want to do. So in terms of even things like sleep, it's saying, if you need to pull an all-nighter one night or for a couple of days because you need to get this delivered for a client or you need to get it done, then you sacrifice the sleep. Absolutely. There should be no dogma or prescription that says every single day of your professional life you need to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z.
Fair.
The
Disclaimer.
context changes. Yeah, the
Right, right.
context changes. But having said that, what we try and especially with entrepreneurs is that they keep that level of awareness into how are they in that moment. Because sometimes entrepreneurs and solopreneurs especially, they go so fast and they go so hard that they wake up 5 years later and they're completely burned out, or it's diminishing returns. They're not getting anywhere because they haven't now and again pushed the reset button and said, okay, I've been driving hard
Ah,
for a number of weeks. I think, man, I just need to take a couple of days. I need to really think about this, take a step back, and if I take that step back, I'm then going to go harder and faster when I get going again. And so it's having it's a couple of things. It's the mindset of sports. So you're thinking about the value of recovery, the value of being off, so that when you are on, it's as effective as you can be. And it's also just having a bit of a discussion with yourself. So even the fact that the Daily Reset is not just a book, it's also a journal. Journaling is hugely
yeah, yeah,
impactful for mental health of
yeah.
anyone, and especially entrepreneurs. So as an entrepreneur, do you have even, maybe you call it a journal, but maybe you call it a logbook, maybe you just anything, right? But
Just
you have a
right.
book
Just right.
and you have a pen, and you just do a brain dump and you think, where am I going? Am I going in the right direction? What do I need? Who can help me? You identify the questions, and I think that's the key thing.
So, Stephen, would this be fair to say that this is the core, I guess, the core value of the sustaining executive performance program that you have?
Yeah, I think that one. So that that was my first book in the space. That was published 2014, and that very much was taking that metaphor of sport, and it was
Hmm.
saying, how do you look at yourself holistically? So there's different dimensions in that program whereby you look at recovery, and sleep is a big part of that. But you also look at training. Do you do physical exercise? What I found at that time when I'd started out with leadership development is that most people in business were leading their lives from the neck up, and in order to optimize what you're doing from the neck up, you need to think about your whole self. And so there was so many things that I'd learned myself as an athlete that I brought into the world of business, and even just managing energy on a basic level. How can you manage your energy better and not just think about the hours that you're grinding every day and every week, right? It's energy management. It's hugely important.
I mean, it just flies by sometimes. You're just so focused on what's at hand that you don't realize 3 4 hours has gone by. And one thing I did want to mention is you're a duathlete, right? So duathlete. So you've basically trained for the FC Barcelona. You've trained for the Tour de France as well. So this is something that you're very familiar with, which is this mindset of training and taking a break. Because I mean, it's like working out a muscle, right? You work out a muscle, you do it every single day. Eventually, yes, it's going to get to failure, and there's a chance of injury. I guess it's the same thing with
For
the
sure.
mind, then.
Yeah, yeah. As you're right, it's and if you're listeners who exercise on a systematic basis, you learn so much from physical training in terms of the discipline, in terms of the
Hmm.
routine, in terms
Hmm.
of just turning up. But there's the mindset that you get from physical exercise. It's the training mindset. How do you improve on something? You systematically look at a problem, you break it down into its constituent parts, you're very mindful on that little tiny part, and you optimize that as much as you can through repetition and through hard
Interesting.
work. You can take so much from that into the world of business, and especially for entrepreneurs.
So what other ideas in the world of business and athletics do you think there's an overlap, or maybe something you've gained from being an international level athlete?
I think a big one is collaboration, right? If
Okay.
if you look at any hugely successful athlete, they are the top of a pyramid. That you don't do it alone. You need a whole team of people around you to
Hmm.
help you. And even if we think, I live in Barcelona. I've been living in Spain for 20 years, and Rafa Nadal just won in the
Hmm.
Australian Open and
Hmm.
became the
Hmm.
first, at least first man to win 21 Grand Slams.
Oh,
And
jeez.
everything in Nadal's development is about the team. And you know there's so many people that help him in different parts of his career and in his sport. And in business, it's often the opposite. As you advance through a career, you tend to there's lots of people that you can tell to do things if you're a senior exec in a company, but there's less people giving you feedback. And so that
Of
coaching mindset also is hugely important. And I think also for entrepreneurs who tend to wear different hats,
course.
they multitask because they need to. But where and when possible, to take it to the next level, as an entrepreneur, really think about who can you get to help you. And it doesn't need to be a huge thing. It could just be, I know, you go and you get a massage once a week and you kick back. You ask someone for a bit of advice on recovery, or you
Hmm.
just have a conversation with somebody. But you get someone else into your life and you make them part of that push that you're on.
So one thing that we push here, and especially in the executive, it's set schedule, we push for the executive team is having 3 mentors that you can connect with every single month. Take them to lunch, take them to coffee, grab 3 people, and it's something that has helped me out tremendously. The collaboration, it's being new, especially for me. I'm very new to business. I've been with the company, working with them for 7 years. As an executive, it's only been probably around 2 or 3 years, and I think just having someone that I can call and say, "Here's a friction point that I'm having," whether they've dealt with the friction point or not, just the experience alone gives me some feedback that allows me to maybe pivot or change something in the framework and say, this kind of helps clear things up. So the collaboration aspect, I think I think you're right. People tend to, especially solopreneurs, those who are just on their own, working their own business, totally forget. I can reach out to friends and family and mentors that have done it. They can definitely give me some feedback. So I like that a lot.
That's a great point. And especially if we're having a difficulty with something, we often make it bigger than it is. We internalize it. But if you give it air, if even
Yes,
if you just speak
yes,
it, right, or you put it down on paper, you think, hey, that isn't so bad, right? And
yeah,
the other thing as well with the mentor, you see it from another perspective. Because we always tend to wear these blinkers and we see it,
yep.
the problem from just one direction. But someone else, it gives you that broad view, and that's what we need, I think.
Um, you mentioned the journaling or the logging, and it's something that I do in my personal life. And obviously, as you write in your personal life, it overlaps with business and ideas, right? Come on. But um, how important do you think it is just writing about what happened in your professional career? And how do you translate what you kind of write on down on paper, translate it to an item that you can or an action that you can take tomorrow that would put you in a better position than you did today?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I'm a big believer in not forcing it. I think if, a lot of things like that help creativity, like free writing, it's a
Hmm.
practice even when you wake up in the morning and before your inner critic kicks in and before you're fully awake, just start
Inner
writing,
critic.
right?
I like
Because when you're
that.
fully conscious, you think, oh no, that's a terrible idea, and you don't
Hmm.
write on a free basis. So I think often just being free with writing and if it's journaling, not to force it too much. Even going back in business to someone like Peter Drucker, the management guru in the 1960s, he started talking about the importance of tracking, and he said, think about a decision that you're going to take in the workplace. Write down your reflections on what decision you're going to take and what you expect is going to happen, and then go back several weeks later and write down what actually did happen. So I think what he was trying to encourage people to do was try to uncover these patterns. And I think these patterns can emerge very quickly or they take a little bit of time. I'm a big believer in action points. So I'm an engineer, I'm very pragmatic, and I like
Reverse
things
engineering, yep.
accessible and
Yep.
action oriented. The second part of your question there, how does this translate into something that I can then do tomorrow? I'm always moving. I always have that bias towards action. And I think, but what I would say is that you have the free writing aspect, let it flow,
Hmm.
and then I think move to concrete action, but don't be frightened if it doesn't work out. I think the next big key point is having a preference for experimentation. So you pilot, you try something new, but you put it into action on a small scale. If it doesn't work, hey, that's fine. It's not disastrous. Then you pivot, as you said, you try something else a little bit different. So I think that's some of the things that I would think would be valuable in that journaling and moving to action approach.
Uh, it's interesting. So again, I've been journaling for personal life for about a year now. Every day. It's been a year, and I think just by getting things off my mind and putting it on paper, there's two things. One, the creativity comes out because again, when you kind of get into that zone, everything you have had in your mind go that you've had all day long is now put on paper. And two, I think it allows me to move on to the next concept, and that's something that has recently helped me kind of grow past a lot of the glass walls that you put in front of yourself. Because by not writing it down, it doesn't feel concrete, and you're constantly just thinking over and over and over. By putting it down, next thing you know, it's now I can move on to that next idea that I've been thinking about and haven't really been able to kind of dive into. So um, again, I've never thought about journaling specifically for professional life. There is that overlap, but I think that that's an awesome concept, and I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna do this. Thanks to this you and I speaking. I'm gonna actually
Awesome.
start to create a professional aspect of my journaling and start to write about work related be more conscious about writing work related stuff now.
Key and just a very quick add on to that is that not to make it another source of stress. So again, just to kind of, and especially for entrepreneurs or high overachieving individuals, we hold ourselves to such high standards. So the only slight thing that maybe anyone would want to bear in mind is that if there's mistakes there, then that's absolutely fine.
Hmm.
with well-being, I talk about in the book how it's a journey, and I've been working in this field myself for 20 years, but I make mistakes every single day, right? And it's all about just you try. If it doesn't work out, you try something else, right? And you be kind to yourself. I think that's what we need to think about as well. Hold ourselves to high standards, absolutely, but if have that bias towards experimentation as well. But anyway, sorry. When you go, when you
No,
go.
no, no. That's and I'm so glad you. Okay, so Stephen, you've used the word well-being or the phrase well-being quite a lot, and that obviously in hand with ties in hand with the daily reset concepts and the chief well-being officer idea that we want to get into. My first question is, what is well-being to you when you can embody or you can kind of picture an officer, a chief officer in an executive position who is in a state of well-being? What does that look like?
Yeah. So look, it's such an interesting term, and you can even contrast it with wellness. Even over the years, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you work in wellness." I don't, and I'll make that distinction in just a moment. For me, well-being is so multi-layered and so complex, but the definition is so simple. It's just a state in which every aspect of your life is good, and that's it. And you can look at a lot of the academic literature. A lot of it comes from positive psychology, and it's the term also of human flourishing. So how do you get to
Okay.
that aspect where you feel that you're flourishing in life? And there's many different aspects to that, but it's often a very subjective thing where you think all the different aspects of your life are good, and you can interpret that in many different ways. There is an aspect which is for yourself, so you can look at elements of physical well-being,
Okay.
emotional well-being,
Right. Right.
mental well-being, spiritual well-being, so you can distinguish those areas. And then you can also look at the people around you, right? So well-being, it doesn't exist in isolation. You can optimize your own well-being, but if your family, if your friends, if your community, if society at large is falling apart, right? I mean, obviously, it's a tricky time in
Especially, you're
human
right,
history right
exactly,
now.
with pandemic and what's going on. And
It's hard
Sure.
to optimize that, right? So things like even the importance of community, even helping your neighbor, right? Even volunteering helps
Hmm.
mental health.
Hmm.
The World Happiness Report in 2020, it didn't take such a nosedive as we might have expected because
Okay.
people came together. There was that real solidarity, and so basically societal well-being is also important, right? It's not just about yourself. So you can look at many different areas of your own well-being. A chief well-being officer, yeah, that was the other book that I'd written a couple of years ago. It was a polemic to try and say to people, think about this very soft term that isn't normally associated with business, and you
Hmm.
put these two words in either side. If you want to have a chief well-being officer position in a company, fantastic. Up until now, it's not so common. Um, Many organizations who have a positive culture, and the key is culture, where there is belonging, where there's psychological safety. Maybe there's not a need for such a position, right? But
Hmm.
sometimes you
Hmm.
do need to champion that, and you have a champion that's going to spend some money, is going to drive initiatives, that's going to help show an example for that positive culture. So those are some of the elements on well-being. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense into what well-being means.
yeah, I mean, I think you broke it down to again, we spend so much time as entrepreneurs so focused on our business, which is majority of it is physical. The mental part of it obviously plays its part, but you don't realize how much the emotional and the spiritual state can take such a dip if you're just so focused on how do I, spending 16, 18 hours of your day just working, in your business. And I like the way you broke down the well-being as far as the four different characteristics and the core values and how important it is. So how do I consciously think about my well-being overall? Again, the physical part of it, generally we do a pretty good job because, I mean, we got to get our goals done, as you said, right? But how do I kind of take a step back and say, all right, I've neglected my spiritual, and by spiritual, we're not talking religious. We're talking internally spiritual, right? But my spiritual, my mental, my emotional state, and how do I start to maybe put some kind of plan around kind of repairing or fixing or being more conscious about, feeding these three aspects that we might tend to neglect?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are different models out there, and in many ways, you can look at a kind of hierarchy of needs. So, a very common model is actually to have physical well being at the base, and you take care of that first. It's
Okay.
often the base. So you think about, how are you fueling yourself on a daily basis? Are you
Right.
eating so that you can take the good decisions? Are you resting? Are you moving? Are you exercising? And then after that, you can move up to the higher order ones, right? You can look at then maybe emotional and mental and then spiritual at the top. And you're quite right. Spiritual doesn't need to mean religion, although it can for an
Right.
individual, right? That could be part of their own journey,
Fair enough. Yeah.
but it's part of your own
Right. Right.
spiritual
Right.
journey.
Okay.
And and purpose, as I mentioned before, is a huge part of spiritual well-being, right? Just thinking
Oh,
about the higher order, you know, moral compass, let's say. What are your own values in your life, and are you moving in the right direction? Where are you going? How do you get there? A lot of it is asking yourself the question. First of all, taking the time, taking the pause, and it doesn't need to be a long time. So if we even link it to journaling, or it doesn't need to be necessarily a practice of journaling, but you have a little bit of space in your life, even if it's 10 minutes a day, but it's space where you're not doing, right? You're not actioning, you're not busy, but it's just time to think. And that gives you the basis of reflecting on what you need at that time. And you listen to yourself. It's interesting. There's some new research that is basically we have five senses, right? And there's some
okay.
new research that calls something. It's a concept called interoception, and it calls it the sixth sense. So basically, you can even try it just now. Even if we just stop and you try and listen, if you can feel your heart beating in your chest for a few seconds.
Mhm.
So it's that awareness of what's going on inside, and we often go so fast that we run over the top of that. So interoception is being aware of physical sensations, but it's also being aware of kind of emotions and mental state at that time. So just having that space where you can check in with yourself. Things like mindfulness meditation also very important. It's at least worth a try. It's not for everyone, but it's
Right.
worth a try to experiment. And you just check in with yourself and you say, what do I need? Space, number one. And the second one, engage with other people. And you get an external view and you have a conversation. It could be this mentor relationship that we talked about before. It could be friends. It could be family. It could be your kids, right? You get another view and they say, hey, dad, mum, what's going on? You're very angry recently, or you're very irritable, or you're smiling a lot more, or you're not smiling as much. So you get that external view. And then I think the third element is just get informed, right? You find out some of the nuts and bolts, some of the information that you need to then take action on whatever element of well-being that you need, right? You read articles, you buy a book, you go online and you find out some of the answers yourself. But the first thing is you identify the questions. You don't jump necessarily to solution mode. I think we're always
Mm.
solve, but
Hmm.
sometimes you need to just think, okay, well, what's the question first? That's the most important thing.
I mean, again, we're always in this mode of do, and sometimes we forget to ask ourselves how we're doing, and we're constantly trying to do stuff for everybody else. And I think um, strategies and framework is very important for people. So being able to take a step back and saying, how can I improve my well-being is something that I don't think we do enough for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, So the lab, tell me a little bit about what you do with the lab. If I were to, to come to you and say I have absolutely no idea what you're doing here, Stephen. I mean, we spent the last half hour and obviously I have some insight, but for me, I'm brand new into all of this. How can I get engaged with you, and what can I expect from you and your team?
Look, I think we just try and change workplace culture. We try and make the workplace somewhere that you get results. Absolutely, you you
Okay.
you 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 aim for high performance. You you embrace ambition, but you don't, you know, just kill yourself in the attempt, right? And again, it's not about being scared of hard work, but it's about embracing health and well-being as a means of attaining that high performance. And not exclusively. It shouldn't just be about performance. I think a big thing is human experience. I think over the years there's a view of work, and I think very much so in the US, Daniel, where research shows that there's a large percentage of people that don't take their full allocation of vacation days every year, right? In Europe, you would never get that, man. You would never get that, especially in Southern Europe, right? I live in Spain. I love Italy and Italian culture, La Dolce Vita. It's human experience. And I think the workplace is such, it's got such potential for elevating human experience, right? And even if you think about different methodologies in work, like agile transformation, what agile does, it makes work better, but also makes the experience of work more enjoyable. Some of the things like you get autonomy, finishing projects rather than starting a million things, right? Getting feedback from the customer, iterating, discovery, all of these things. It means that you finish your workday and you think, wow, that was great. I learned a lot. I collaborated with people. I felt like I developed relationships. And so all of that is in the mix. And so basically it's positive culture, I think. You're trying to make the experience of work better. You go for high performance, but you also improve health and well-being. Do we get that every time? It's a hard nut to crack, absolutely. But we just try and change opinions. We try and legitimize well-being when it often hasn't been taken seriously enough. When you put it next to strategy and finance and internalization and all of these different things, it should be one of those core concerns. And so products that we have, a lot of training, right? A lot of professional development, workshops, keynote speeches, online learning, all that kind of stuff. Individual coaching as well, very important.
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be kind of the best way to get in contact with you?
Maybe if you'd be so kind to leave a couple of links, but people can find me pretty easily online. I'm quite active on different social networks, and you've got the Leadership Academy of Barcelona website and the website of the book also, which is dailyreset.me. So that's dailyreset altogether.me, and all the details and contact and all the information. We're very keen in giving out stuff for free, and we even have an e-nudge service that people can sign up to that via email, cool. And they get that for free for 1 month, and they can see what it's like and they get a taste for it, And I am a big believer in that, getting a lot of content out there and just trying to change the view of well-being in the world. I think that's very important. That's the kind of mission and the purpose that I have personally.
So it kind of leads me to a question regarding, for me, there's this perceived versus this actual, I guess, understanding. Perceived is, well, how can this affect me? And actual is, well, what is it going to affect? If I were to start to take a lot of what you're teaching, Stephen, and I were to, it sounds like even if I were to take one or two concepts of what we spoke about today and implement it, how do you think that would change the quality of life? So, as far as maybe energy or work-life balance or efficiency, I start to put this stuff into action. What can I expect in return?
I think it comes down to that element of experience. I would like to think that you would feel more involved in life, more aware. I think that's maybe the key thing to describe. When we're busy and we've got a lot going on, and especially as we age, we settle into the same patterns of thinking and doing. And we kind of run over the top of life, and awareness tends to decrease a little bit, right? We do less things for the first time. And so what I would like to think is that you just increase your awareness of life. It becomes just richer in a way. And and you get involved. You're empowered. You're part of that discovery process. You're looking at cause and effect. You're engaged. If something doesn't work out, that's fine. But you're not just on autopilot.
The
I think this happens a
reacting
lot in
versus
business.
actively, taking action.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think it's just that, I don't know, waking up, for want of a better way of describing that, right? And getting out of that autopilot mode and just getting a bit more involved and doing it every day. And it's not easy, right? I
Consistency,
always have
yeah.
to remind myself. But if you build a system and you've got different cues around you, then it's worth it, I think.
So what would you consider step one of starting to become aware of what's going on around you?
Buy the daily reset. Can I say that? Can I say that?
Ah, there it is. There it is.
Look, I think it's coming back. I don't want to just keep repeating, but it's the key aspects of this approach. It's having space. It's having a little bit of space in your day to think.
Okay.
If I go back to even when I was at Stanford for a semester, it was just after I finished my first degree, and most of my peers and friends, they went to the world of work, and they had a salary, and I was still a student, and I had no money. But the good thing that I had time to think, and it sounds strange because if you're a graduate and you graduate from school, university, and you go to an organization, of course they're employing you to think, but they're often going so hard at that age that they're just following someone else's instructions. They're so busy. It's deferred enjoyment in life. I think a lot of this controversy that came out of companies like Goldman Sachs several months ago was, why do we always put off, as if we are saving and creating this condition for optimum life at a time when we won't be able to enjoy it so much because we're too old, or we don't have the energy, or we got the money but then we don't have the health, right? When you're in your 20s and 30s, and that's when you run the hardest and go the fastest, but that's the time in your life when you should be having a lot of fun as well, right? Anyway, getting back to the step one.
Well, so before we go to step one, I think now the question becomes, well, how do you find that balance in your 20s and 30s?
Yeah, who knows, right? I mean, look, just I went to university in Glasgow, which is a fantastic city, and you know how to party in Glasgow, and you have a good time. So yeah, I don't know. I think you just keep learning. I think that's the key. I think learning has to come into this, Daniel. That you learn about yourself, absolutely, and you learn about the world around you, and you become curious. You meet people, you have conversations, you learn something new. You dig into history, you dig into future studies, and you have that curiosity. I think, and as long as you've got that, then that's going to give you that balance. I think, right? It's getting a bit philosophical.
All right, so now back to step one.
Like, it's space to think. So I basically said it, but it's space to think, and whatever comes out of that, then is that following your heart? Is it following your mind? I don't know, but you just have a little bit of space and you check in. You have those check-ins, preferably on a daily basis, and you see what's going on, and if you're happy or if you're not, right?
That's I can understand how that could feel and seem so difficult for people, because it's something you're not comfortable doing. Checking in with yourself, you're used to checking in with others, right? And it's so easy, to see how others are doing. But when it comes to yourself, it does become, for some people, if not for it does become a little uncomfortable to ask yourself how you're doing, because I think the emotional aspect of it really requires you to kind of dive into uncomfortable situations that you might not have tried to digest in a while.
Totally.
And I think, but that's that's where we do come with you can find the most amount of growth when you are in that, I guess, when what you're calling is in that space.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It's not easy. It's hard to be vulnerable. And research does show that we are much kinder to others in general, and even pets, than we are to
Yeah. Yep.
ourselves.
Yep.
If you write down, how you treat yourself, and if you would then translate that to another person, never mind someone that you're close to, but just any other human being, you'd be, my God, what am I doing
Right.
to this
Yep.
this individual, right? We
Yep.
have that self kind of punishment, and it's an absolutely great point. Maybe something that would help is that you practice that vulnerability with another person, and then that gives you that reward. Perhaps it makes you feel better about yourself, and possibly the other person is going to then bounce that back to you.
Right.
Right.
Say, well, hey, thank you. I really needed that. I wasn't aware of what was going on. I really appreciate it. What about you?
So that's something that we do. My COO Udi Dorner, actually, he makes it a requirement for managers, middle managers and upper managers, that you do need to have what we call is a check-in with your downline, where it's you're on, your 15 minutes, or even if it's 15 minutes, you are sitting one-on-one with your downline and you're checking in. You're not talking about work. You're talking about, whatever they're comfortable with personally going on in their lives, just to make sure that personally everybody is, doing all right. And if not, then we have this little thing where when you check in with your upline, you do, start to kind of give feedback on ways we can improve culture and quality of work here at Set Schedule. So I love it. I love it. We do it with everybody else, but it's so much more difficult to do it with ourselves. And I think it is something very, very, very important, for both personal life and also professional life, where people don't realize how much of your personal life does affect what's going on professionally. You may want to say it doesn't, but you can't check out, all of your personal items at the door. Some of it does follow you into the office, and I hope that people start to be conscious about this in their lives, and really start to kind of find ways to balance out. And, getting the book and getting the book, The Daily Reset, I think that's awesome. Again, I'm going to go back to it. I love the daily idea of a nudge in the morning. Kind of gets you to be conscious about something that you might not have been conscious about starting your day. So that's that, as far as the book goes. I'm gonna look into it and see, maybe I'll grab a copy of it myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel.
Stephen, any final words for our listeners? Again, so a lot of our listeners are new business, new entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, those who are really starting to make a strive into growing their business and putting themselves out there. Again, the vulnerability that we talked about, putting yourselves out there, is something that, we try to do on our platform, make it very easy for people. Any advice, final words that you could give for someone who is that kind of persona?
Yeah, I mean, two things come to mind. Just when you're making those last points, a quote came to my mind, and I'd like to share that quote. And then there's another point that it's a previous point that we discussed. I think as a leaving message, I think is important. But in terms of who we are in our personal lives and who we are in our professional lives, maybe we do want a little bit of separation. That's sometimes safe and necessary. But there was something that the CEO of Telefonica said to me a few years ago when I interviewed him. Telefonica, the Spanish-owned telecommunications company in Madrid. And he said, it's not like I go to work only with my head and not my heart, or that I'm at home only with my heart and not my head. I'm the same person, head and heart, in both places. So I thought that was a fantastic quote. The final message, I think, for any listeners, and especially entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are very much driving hard, doing great stuff, but feel that it's hard going, is just don't do it alone. Just think about, yes, you are perhaps multitasking, you're wearing many hats, and that's what you need to do right now to get ahead. But just think about, even on a tiny level, is there anyone in your personal network or even a professional service that you can engage that's just going to lighten the load a little bit, and it's just going to allow you to keep moving forward and it just gives you that sense of, right, okay, it's not just me. And so that I think is a key message. Just don't do it alone.
Love it. I love it. You know, it's easy for us to get lost in our own heads, and it's we always need someone to kind of help us and shake us and wake us up and again reset us every single day. So awesome. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope our listeners, today decide they're going to take some kind of action to better their business from all the different concepts and ideas that you've put out there. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and I enjoyed this very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Great questions, great discussion. Loved it. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for visiting and joining us on this mindset, and we'll see you guys on the next one.